Check, 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 check. 1, 2, check, check.
Gentlemen, I'm Dave Crouch. This is Policy Talks that's produced each month by the Williamson Inc., our Chamber of Commerce here in Williamson County, and we are excited to be back at Columbia State Community College this morning and got some distinguished guests in the audience, including our U.S. Congressman from the 7th District, Mark Green. Congressman Green, really glad to have you with us this morning, and just want to thank everybody that's with us from the WCTV audience watching on Channel 3, Comcast Channel 3, and the WAKM AM 950 audience as well. It's a lot of folks out there. We hope you're going to enjoy the show this morning. Again, we're very excited to be back here at Columbia State. Appreciate Dr. Lampley and the staff here making us so welcome. And we've got a lively looking crowd here with us this morning. Congressman Green, I'm going to do a little intro because until I did my homework, I didn't know all I should have known about you. And if you look at his webpage, and I've got to learn how to sit on the seat this morning. I'm usually standing, but the congressman grew up on a dirt road in Mississippi, I think. He started his military career at West Point and has served in various roles in the military for 24 years. First as an Army officer, and then as he went back to school and got a medical degree, he served as a flight surgeon and did a couple of tours of duty in Iraq and I think another one in Afghanistan. So he's got lots of experience that touches on the news that's in the news today. And then after he retired from the military, you've had a very successful private business career, not to mention a very successful political career since 2012, I believe, serving as both a state senator and now as our congressman. Did I miss anything?
I've never cut an album. You don't want me to sing, so.
It's so interesting to have you with us. The committees that you're on in Congress, Congressman, Wikipedia, my favorite source, and your website aren't totally in sync. But as I understand it, you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Coronavirus Crisis Committee. Wikipedia says you're on the Homeland Security Committee.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so subcommittees intelligence and counterterrorism, and subcommittee on transportation and maritime safety. So obviously there's a lot of things we want to circle back that you probably have been involved in, and I want to give you a chance to tell us more about it. Unfortunately, we're facing a couple of disasters this past week. One of which is right here in our backyard down in Waverly, Humphreys, Hickman, Houston counties, all of which I think are in your district. Tell us, you've been down there, tell us what you've seen, what there is going on.
Thanks for having me. Can y'all hear me okay? Waverly is a tragic story. If you haven't had a chance to get down there, there's plenty of video on TV and online to see it, but the stories are just heartbreaking, and what made the press, and you probably read about, was the story of the father who had his two twins swept out of his arms as he, and that's probably the most gut-wrenching, but a story of a dad on his sofa with his wife sitting in a lazy boy or something on the other side of the room, and the house literally split in two, and she was swept away, and that house, end of the house was swept away, and you know, she died. And that was the last, you know, hearing him describe the last images of his wife sitting there, and then the next thing, she's gone. Just very, very tragic stories, and there are just tons of those out there. You know, houses that are just completely swept hundreds of yards downstream. A house pulled up to a gas pump. I mean, that literally it looks like this house just pulled up to a gas pump at the Exxon station. Unbelievable stories and lots of devastation.
Now, it's been declared a disaster area by the president.
Yep. We added Hickman and Houston counties as well. So I think Dixon got added too. It's minor damage there, not nearly as bad as Waverly. And I don't think any deaths, all of the deaths were in Humphreys County. So
obviously the disaster area declaration will help with federal money and things like that. Logistically, what's going to be done, and even further than that, what can we do here in Williamson County?
Well, first off, thanks to your law enforcement and fire departments who all sent people. I was there the day after the event. Williamson County was there with a truck, helping to do recovery. So, you know, thank your leadership for making those decisions. And it, you know, it was very helpful. Right now, there are multiple places that are collecting money. If you want to make a financial donation, there are several churches. Compassion Church in Waverly is organizing. First Baptist Church in Waverly is a place where you can make a donation. There are also visitor centers or volunteer centers. So if you want to volunteer to go clean up debris, you can go and you know, link up at those churches and do that. I mean, it's just they need bodies and they need money.
Bodies and money.
I noticed as I stopped to grab a cup of coffee this morning, I saw the local Shell station down here had buy an Armor, whatever it is. I don't do those. Yeah, one of those energy drinks to be sent out to Waverly. So each person coming up the cash register has a chance to do that. It's just,
wow,
that's good stuff, you know, a business facilitating that.
Right. Can your staff assist getting people in touch with things that they can do?
Sure. I mean, you can call our staff and connect. Really, the best place to go would either be Compassion Church or you know, First Baptist. Those are the two centers where volunteers are going. So if you want to volunteer, I'd connect with those because that's what we're going to tell you to do.
Okay.
Let's go there.
Of course, the other disaster that has happened this week happened yesterday in Afghanistan. You served a tour of duty over there. You were a flight surgeon, so you probably saw some pretty tragic things in your service over there. Don't know quite what to ask you about what's going on over there now, but if you were president, what would you have done different?
So that's a pretty open-ended question, actually, believe it or not. Well, I first off, I think the way this withdrawal has happened has just been a strategic failure, both a strategic and operational failure. You know, you don't take your best airfield to extract people out of. You know, think of this as a pipeline. It's a pipeline coming out of Afghanistan, bringing 150,000 people out. Do you want the diameter of your pipe to be really small, or do you want the diameter of your pipe to be bigger? as we all know from Bernoulli's equation. How many of you can recite Bernoulli's equation? I learned that many years ago at West Point. It's the volume of flow through a pipe is exponentially dependent upon the diameter of the pipe. So the difference between 2 airfields and 1 airfield is not 2x, right? It's exponentially more than that. If you go 4 or 5 airfields, then you can flow a lot more people out. You also have to think too about securing the airfield. So what airfield is easier to secure? One in the middle of an urban area where your perimeter can only see 1 street away, or an airfield like Bagram Air Base, which has kilometers of view from the perimeter to where the enemy can be seen. So this decision that was made by the president made the decision, and I know this is a bipartisan group, but Joe Biden made the decision not to use Bagram Air Base. His generals told him, this is the best place for us to exfil people from. He said, no, I want to go to 600 people, 600 military people. He set that arbitrary cap, and Mark Milley told him, I cannot secure Bagram Air Base with only 600 Marines. And the president said, I don't care. Go to 600, and well, then the only airfield we can secure with 600 people is Kabul. It is one runway. So a single mortar round, and strategically placed, takes out the airfield. So this decision was perhaps one of the biggest debacles in military decision making, and our generals didn't make the call. It was the president, because he wanted a number that he seemed to have pulled out of the air. And that is probably the biggest piece of the failure. The other really bad idea, you know, if I'm shooting at you, Ken, and you're my enemy, and we're contending for 20 years, we're fighting, and my forces are killing your forces, and your forces are killing my forces, and suddenly, hey, I'm leaving, will you guard my perimeter? The stupidity of that boggles even my Democrat colleagues. You know, Jason Crow's an Army Ranger. We were in Afghanistan about the same time. He's a Colorado Democrat. I'm a Tennessee Republican. And we sit there and we scratch our heads and we go, whoa. Another big piece of the failure was the State Department. And I think the State Department owns the majority of the blame here, besides the president. DOD was given an order, execute this mission. And these are the parameters around which we want you to execute the mission. The generals said, this is a bad idea, and this is why, and we don't need less force, we need more force, by the way. The president said, I don't care, and they said what every general says when the commander-in-chief says, execute the mission. They said, Roger, we will go and execute the mission under the parameters that you've given us. And they said to State, you better start processing people now, because this pipeline is going to get really small really fast. And State did not process people until a few weeks ago. The insanity of that boggles anyone's mind. When they hear that, they're like, wait a minute, you had 90,000 applications in June. Why weren't you sending people home then? And Blinken deflects. So I've had multiple conversations with him, and he just deflects. So if I were to say the majority of this tragedy, where the blame lies, it's with the president's bad decisions, just arbitrary numbers, and the decisions it forced on the military, and then State Department's failure to get the process going in time to actually affect. And there will be Americans left there. It is physically impossible now to get every American out. And what the State Department changed its tune, they were saying, we know we can't get everybody out in a classified briefing. And that's not classified. That was in the briefing, but that's not classified. They then, the next day said, well, If they don't show up, then that probably means they don't want to leave. That's what the Secretary of State said. So that's like sort of saying, okay, I can't hit 100, so I'm going to change the standard to 80 and pat myself on the back. The real ramifications of this, if I might take a second.
Please.
The real ramifications of this are horrific in the near term, and that is those Americans that will be left there probably subject to being hostages, maybe beheadings, whatever the Taliban, ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda want to do, right? They will become the objects of their wrath against us, our ideology. The long-term effects, though, are the degraded state of American foreign policy for decades. When the United Kingdom, who happens to be our greatest ally, has a member of parliament on the floor of the House of Commons say the following: that president is shameful, and we have to figure out how to become independent of the United States. Let's think about that. So what is Taiwan thinking right now? What is Malaysia thinking? We're not in an alliance with those guys, but we need them as we counter China in the Indo-Pacific. People right now are going, well, we can't trust America. And I can tell you that we are in a unique phase in the world right now, in something that I actually call the Polarity Cycle. Can I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So any
You're already answering some of my questions. So.
Okay. Any international relations folks in the room? When you think of history and how the world order is shaped right now, how nations interact with one another, the world seems to cycle. After a great war, there are peace agreements because the combatants, the nations, are exhausted. You know, whether it was the 30 Years' War, or the 7 Years' War, or the Napoleonic Wars, or the nations are exhausted. So they'll sign a treaty just to end the thing. And at that moment in time, the nations are equal because the legitimacy of the document makes them equal nations, and they tend to treat one another equally, but very quickly that legitimacy phase based on that document transitions into what many people call the balance of power phase, where nations will start to build up their militaries because they don't trust their neighbor. And the nation who has the better economy winds up with the bigger military, and before long, this multipolarity that happens after the exhaustion and the legitimacy phase, it goes into what's called the alliance phase. And nations begin to form alliances because the smaller nation can't compete with the bigger nations, and so they align with a bigger country, and before long, that multipolarity turns into two poles of opposing forces, and what happens then? Great power, war. We left the Cold War, a bipolar war. Mm-hmm. You think of the proxy wars of Vietnam and Korea and all that, and the people who died in that conflict between us and communism, and went into something very unique in the world called a unipolar moment, a single superpower. And that moment is rapidly going away as a rising China comes up, and we go into bipolarity. We go into that bipolar moment in world history when what happens? Great conflict and massive wars.
So how
it is a precursor to that. And so what do you need? We need alliances. It's the most important thing we need right now. And what do we do in the moment when we need the alliances? We tell people you can't trust us. Crazy.
Glad I asked that question.
Sorry. Maybe I'll teach when this gig's up.
So how serious is the threat from China?
So we are already in a massive strategic competition with China. And if you want to think about how nations compete, the best way that I can describe it is with the DIME paradigm. D-I-M-E, diplomatic conflict, informational, or you can say diplomatic war, informational war, military war, and that's where we think of traditional kinetic stuff, and it could be balance of power conflict too, and then economic. Well, the cyber stuff that China's been doing, stealing our intellectual property, doing actual true cyber attacks against companies in the United States and against, they stole every single military guy's personal information. They were 18 months in PERSCOM at the United States military.
What does that mean?
They cracked into our personnel system and downloaded the information of every military person in the United States military. And they were in that system for 18 months before we realized they had cracked into it. It was China.
Serious.
Yeah, huge, right? Some would say an act of war. They're mapping every individual in the United States. If you look at the economic piece of that, Motorola, remember Motorola, the great American company? That company had two divisions. One was its cell towers division, and the other, of course, the phones and things like that. Well, the cell towers division was valued at like $11 billion in the early 90s. And they went into China to do business in China, and of course, China forced them to share their intellectual property in order to do business there. Now, the business made the decision to do that. China stole that technology, gave it to Huawei. Huawei, subsidized by the Chinese government, was able to price that under what Motorola could afford to do. And Motorola was scrapped for $900 million in 2011, I think. And 50,000 Americans lost their job, and $2 billion came off of our GDP. Why is that important? Because your military comes from your GDP. A nation's GDP determines how big its military is going to be. Its military determines how safe that nation is going to be against the bad guys in the world. So that economic warfare has been going on for decades with China. There's a fantastic book that talks about it called The 100-Year Marathon, China's War Against the West. And I may have the subtitle not 100% there, so forgive me. It's by Dr. Michael Pillsbury, and it's a fantastic book. That'll give folks a good place to start.
I wish this was just a show on foreign policy, because I'd like to hear about Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, because obviously you've given it a lot of thought, and we'd like to hear it, but we've got some really other important...
Well, this is a business leaders meeting, so I'm guessing the economy's coming up soon.
It's on the agenda here. But in addition to those two disasters, we've been dealing with COVID-19 for the past 18 months or so. You're a medical doctor. I want to ask you the same question. If you were president, how would you handle that? We probably don't have time for that question on every subject. I'd love to hear it. But where we are now, what are you telling your wife and kids? What do we do?
I'm telling them to go about their lives in a normal fashion. I'm telling them that they should get the vaccine. I'm telling them, and I know there's a lot of, and this is very interesting, the vaccine seems to split parties. It's the most interesting thing. About 50% of Republicans support the vaccine, and about 50% say it's insane, and and about 50% of Democrats support the vaccine, and about 50% of Democrats say it's crazy. It's really the weirdest thing. It seems totally irrelevant to party, whether they're suspicious or not suspicious of the vaccine. I make decisions as a physician based on the risk benefits, right? If Ken were going to fix my elbow, which, by the way, I should talk with you about later, man, it's killing me. Cash only, I got it. He's going to tell me, Mark, this surgery that we're going to do, you could bleed to death. You could get an infection. And those risks are low, but they're there.
Yeah.
You've all, if you've ever had a surgical procedure, you know, you got to sign away because the doctor doesn't want to get sued, and they, you know, they want you to understand there's risk there. It's true with the vaccine. There are risks to just sticking that needle in your arm. There's a risk of an infection. The question you have to ask is, does that risk, based on my age and the risk of getting COVID, you know, which is greater? And certainly for the elderly, you and me.
Watch it now.
You know, the risk of those side effects relative to the risk of what happens if you get COVID, I mean, you get the vaccine. Now that's my opinion, okay? And my political people are back there saying, no, don't say that. You're going to piss off half the Democrats and half the Republicans. Well, the Democrats are already all mad at me anyway. But but that's just what I feel as a physician in looking at the data. And I have a responsibility as a doctor to go outside of the political world and say what I really think. And so that's what I think. If you're you know, 40 and above, I mean, it really is, the risk-benefit ratio is worth getting the vaccine. Masks. You want to skip it, or do you want to go?
Let's limit our discussion there.
Okay. Limit it. Oh, that's hard. There are observational studies since COVID started that show what an observational study is there's no control group. It's just, you know, a few hundred people, and they make an observation based on that. Those show that the mask in a non-healthcare setting is somewhat protective. Randomized controlled trials, that's the highest level of research that can be done. There have been 14 of those, none of which support wearing a mask. And the one study that tested in a randomized controlled trial COVID-19 with the mask found no statistical difference between the two groups. So that's what the data says. And actually a 74-study meta-analysis done previous to COVID. So before COVID ever came out, there was a meta-analysis. What is a meta-analysis? A meta-analysis is where they go and look at all the studies that have been done on a topic. They normalize them mathematically, and they compare the conclusions of all 74. The meta-analysis said there's no significant difference in wearing a cloth mask in a non-healthcare setting. So that's just what, that was in Lancet, published in the Lancet pre-COVID. So,
Dr. Moore, would you like equal time? Our officials in Williamson County have somewhat of a different slant on that. One of our guests here is Mayor Franklin, Dr.
I didn't know this was a debate.
I would never debate our congressman, and he already has demonstrated to us his intellect and his ability to grasp so many subjects in such a great manner and research, and we appreciate his representation for us. I think the point he makes is that the vaccine is a fabulous weapon against COVID, and they're risking anything. And you know, I'm a vaxxer. I believe in it. I look at it from a scientific medical standpoint and try not to get into politics, and unfortunately it's become a political thing. So
I will say this, that really I believe in freedom, and I believe people should have choice, whether it is mask or the vaccine. I also believe that a company should have the right to require whatever it wants of its people. I mean, that's freedom, right? I mean, if we want to have, unless we want the business community to be dictated to by the federal government, I think a private business should make its own decisions, and that government should just stay out of it. That's my personal opinion.
Those are some weeds we probably need to just leave to another discussion sometime. So, and there's so many things going on in this world that I know you're privy to a lot of information that you know, we never see, and I just want to try to cover as much of it this morning as we can. Of course, the business community is vitally interested in two bills that are working their way through Congress right now. We've got a 1.2 or $1 trillion infrastructure bill that is their $3.5 trillion budget bill. Tell us about that infrastructure bill. What's in it? It's
Let me get my notes. The infrastructure bill that really isn't infrastructure. Although there is some infrastructure spending. There, in the first bill, the 1.2 trillion, there's about 550 billion in new spending that's above baseline, what was intended to be in the budget anyway. And there's additional money for good infrastructure stuff like roads. There's some purchases on rail. There's some bad decisions on mass transit. Mass transit just doesn't seem to work, or at least the dollar, let me put it this way, it works in some places under unique circumstances, and it works when there's a private-public partnership, right? But government-based or government-run mass transit, dollar for person carried is probably one of the most expensive ways to do it. And they spend a ton of money on that in this bill at the expense of roads and bridges and things that really need, which carry a lot more people. So it's not an efficient use of our money. And there, I mean, I could go through the list here. You probably don't want me to do that, but that bill has some good things in it. It has some really bad things in it. So here's my concern about broadband. You know, they want a fiber optic. They're going to spend $67 billion to put some fiber cable down. What happens if next year a revolution in wireless, and we just spent $67 billion and it's cable in the ground? And there's a strong chance, talking to the scientists, that they can come up with something within a year or two that will make that $67 billion a waste of money. But it's Washington, D.C.
It's the popular thing today to talk about. What about Tennessee? Is there anything specific in the bill?
Yeah, there's millions of dollars that will come to us for road projects, and TDOT has their list, and they're prepared to execute off of their priorities list. Paul Deggs and those guys are making good decisions with the money they get. So I am encouraged that there will be many road projects that will get going. The challenge, of course, is labor. That's our problem across all industries, as I understand it. Not only, and of course, Governor Lee pushed back on the unemployment benefits that were paying people not to work, but you know, when you put that much money into the economy, results in inflation, and the downstream effect on labor is pretty significant. I'll give you an example of how that works, and most of the business folks in here get this. But if the price to manufacture something goes up 8.8%, how many jobs go to China? So inflation impacts jobs in that the price to manufacture sends the jobs overseas. And so there are just all these different microeconomic impacts on flooding the economy with tons of money. And last year, we added $5 trillion to our debt. And let that sink in for a moment. $5 trillion to our debt. When Barack Obama became president, we only had $10 trillion of debt in the whole country. For the, you know, at that point, cumulatively, we had $10 trillion in debt. We added $5 trillion last year, between last year and this year, to this date. So,
You really want to get in the weeds a little deeper?
fire away.
The
And unafraid.
the progressives of our Democratic friends have come up with a new economic theory called modern monetary theory. Excuse me. They don't think those bonds that the Fed's been buying will ever be repaid or need to be repaid. How do you feel about that?
Well, you just look at the inflation over the past 3 or 4 months. I mean, it's over 5% again this last month. They were saying 2 months ago, this is transitory, it's going to go away. And we're like, no, you flood the economy with money, you get inflation. Well, guess what? It's still up. Right now, we're looking at 4.6% for clothing, 3 to 5% for food. Gasoline is 40% up. Used cars are 40% up. Think about what your savings account for retirement is going to be able to buy you if this 5% inflation sticks around for very long. And they're talking about spending over the next decade, I think this number's right, $65 trillion. So if you think about how long inflation is going to be with us at a rate much higher than the average of 2%, and if you're retiring 10 years from now, what you thought would be enough to cover you in retirement is going to be significantly below what you thought it was going to be with purchasing power parity.
Better have a really good financial advisor.
Well, they're all getting a wrench thrown in the machine, right? Because now they go, oh my gosh, we got to compensate for 5 or 6 or 7, or what's it ultimately going to be when all this money hits the economy? And they don't really know, because this has never happened in history. So these monetarists, right, these modern monetarists are rolling the dice on their guess, again, because it's never happened in history, that this isn't going to kill us. Which we're all going, well, every time excess money was put in the system before, it led to $1,000 loaf of bread.
I'd love to spend another hour on that subject, but that would probably not be what the audience wants to hear. So we'll move on to, but on a related area, all the financial channels this morning were on hyperventilating about what Chairman Powell was going to say at 9 o'clock at the Jackson Hole conference. And he's been saying no inflation to worry about. Just don't worry about it. It's going to be okay.
I asked him myself. I'm like, he was in one committee and he was testifying, and I'm like, what about this? And it's transitory. It'll be fixed in no time. I'm like, okay. I don't think so, Chairman.
More specifically, the budget bill they're talking about is $3.5 trillion, as I understand it. And this is an honest question because I couldn't figure it out. But Wikipedia said the budget last year was $4.5 trillion or thereabouts. The spending, I couldn't connect the dots there. How is this different from what we've had in the past?
This is in addition to the baseline budget.
Addition.
This is an additional $3.5 trillion.
Ooh. Okay.
But you'll be able to charge your car every mile. I mean, literally, that's what they're talking about. Every mile or they're going to, what is it, at 50 miles? Okay. Every 50 miles, we're going to put an electrical plug. Now, let me just share with you the gas station guys that took their money out of their pocket and built their companies with risking their own capital to hire their own people, are sitting back going, so we're going to have competition paid for by the federal government, by the taxpayer. How many of you drove on tires to get here today? How many of you drive on tires to go to work every day? When you go to buy groceries at your grocery store, do you drive on tires? I think the government should have tire stores because we all need tires. I mean, how could you survive without tires? We can't survive without tires. I think the federal government should run all the tires industry in America. I mean, this is ludicrous. It's ridiculous, right? That the federal government now is going to run this car charging stations all over I mean, it makes no sense. It competes with business. If a businessman should do it, the government shouldn't do it. If it's in the yellow pages, the government should not be in that business, period. And this is one of those things where an entrepreneur has an opportunity. What happens if the next battery is just, you drive up to the place and they slide an uncharged battery out and the new charged battery goes in and you just keep driving? Well, all those stations sitting there that the government's pay, well, we'll plant flowers around them and they'll look real nice going down the highway. Innovation in the marketplace is better than the government wasting money on stuff like this, period.
Obviously, your level of knowledge about this stuff is fascinating, and we're really enjoying this discussion. Anything else we need to cover on the financial end of things? We actually are doing okay on time so far. So,
you know, the whole Green New Deal. AOC sat next to me for years. I mean, she's a very pleasant person. I enjoy having conversations with her. But she thinks completely differently than I do. I do believe that CO2 is rising and that we need to do something about it. And I actually started a not-for-profit called Green Interchange. You can actually go online. Your car emissions will be covered by 6 trees. You can go online right now and donate 6 trees to be planted. And that covers, and we'll do it this fall. In November, we're going to have a tree planting. I've gotten permission from TDOT to let us plant trees in the interchanges. You know, in this economy, it's all about the unleveraged assets. Uber and Airbnb, let's leverage assets to make money. Well, that's land that is sitting there unused. How can we use that land? Plant trees. So the best CO2 vacuum cleaner on the planet is still a tree. So let's plant trees in the interchanges. TDOT agreed, and we've got this entity called Green Interchange. But at the same time, Italy didn't flood in 2005, 2007, 2011. All these predictions that have been the dire, predictions about climate catastrophe have failed to be true. So we need a balanced approach on the environment and not this trillions of Green New Deal stuff that the alarmists are saying is necessary. And I know that also puts me crossways with a little bit of both sides of the party, because this issue, interestingly enough, also splits, much like the vaccine issue. There are Democrats who are all in with the Green New Deal. There are Democrats who are not and think it's alarmist. There are Republicans who are, interestingly enough, there are Republicans who are really into that. And there are Republicans who are not. So it's a very interesting dynamic there. But I think that's something that needs to be talked about. And we all got to say, well, what's my part in this, right? So electric cars, they help, right? Plant a tree. We all have, there are things we can all do, but some of the alarmist stuff and the taxpayer dollars that are going to be wasted are just going to be debilitating to the economy in the country.
We could talk about climate change for a while. I've got a lot of questions about that. I better move on.
Okay.
We could.
My guys are saying move on.
Okay. Interesting development coming up shortly is redistricting. A lot of growth in Williamson County and particularly the counties around Nashville. Murray County, I think, was one of the fastest growing counties over the past 10 years. Do you know yet how that's going to affect your district and specifically Williamson County?
There are all sorts of ideas out there, but the primary one is, should Republicans try to split Nashville and acquire an extra, seat? And my belief is that would be a bad idea. If you look at Atlanta and you look at Philadelphia, 2 cities that tried to do that, within 3 to 4 years, 3 to 4 cycles, those cities, flipped. And so right now we're a very comfortable 7-2. We can stay a very comfortable 7-2 for 10 years. or we can take some risk, and we probably can get an 8-1 for 4 to 6 years. But Nashville is indigo blue, and North Rutherford is indigo blue, and they're only going to get bluer. So my belief is that if we do that, it's sort of like getting a little greedy, and that often hurts you in the long run. The other thing to consider is when you have a district that's a 55-45, that's a different candidate than a district that's a 60-40. Okay? So you have to ask yourself what kind of congressman you want in Washington, D.C. If you want a congressman that's in a 55-45, well, that congressman is going to look a lot different because he has to serve that district. And if you look at the Republicans who are in 55-45s or the Democrats that are in 55-45s, they vote different than their main party. So just consider that. Those are the two things to consider as redistricting. Now, let me just say this as a final thought about redistricting. I want to continue to represent Williamson County. My business is over on Maryland Way, the company I founded. And I love this community. I have deep relationships here. I would really like to keep Williamson County. So I hope that happens, but all I can do is yell from the sidelines because the state legislature gets to make those decisions.
Coincidentally, yesterday, I think it was, the governor appointed our state representative, Sam Whitson, to the Select Committee of the House on Redistricting. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
That's correct. The Speaker, now I'm on 9 committees, thanks to the Speaker. I think the average is 4. I just want to say one thing about Congressman Green. When I was a freshman representative up there, he was the first person from the Senate that reached out to me and said, let's co-sponsor some great legislation on the F&E tax. Mark, I'll never forget that, and I appreciate your trust and friendship, and what a great job you've done here today. I just want to tell you that. Okay, but on the Select Committee of the House, 16 members, first ever bipartisan committee to do redistricting. And it's a great team. The Speaker's intent is to have a fair and constitutional outcome from this redistricting. We have not had a meeting yet. Really cannot talk about the parameters because we have not been told what we can talk about. And but it's and it's interesting too. He appointed 3 coordinators. Like for instance, Gary Hicks from East Tennessee is the coordinator for West Tennessee. So that kind of keeps him, you know, a fair and honest broker on that. Patsy Hazelwood from Middle Tennessee is going to be the coordinator for East Tennessee, and Kevin Vaughn from Memphis or Shelby County will be the coordinator for Middle Tennessee.
I don't understand that, but that's okay.
It makes sense to me. And what the congressman is saying is correct. You know, it's we're looking for a constitutional, supportable decision when we come out of this.
Great. Any other thoughts for the congressman this morning?
I think both of us wish we were company commanders again on the ground, and I mean that sincerely because that's the commitment we carry for this country.
Really appreciate your service. I'm going to pick another one of our audience members to maybe provide a little more color to what the congressman is saying. Dusty Rhodes, Williamson County Sheriff. I didn't tell you I was going to call on you, but from your point of view, is there anything you need either from our state legislature or from our Congress to maybe make your job easier? Is there anything that could help you out at this point?
Find me more people. I'm so short-staffed, and you know the county does the best they can with what they can to give us decent salaries and stuff. But I don't have people knocking my doors down, coming to work, and we are short-staffed in every division. And it, you know, for me to hire somebody new and get them on the street, it takes me about 2 years. and it's just a never-ending cycle. So other than that, like I say, the county does good for us. I just need to get some more people out there.
Just wanted to get any thoughts you have. Matt, I'm going to throw it back here to you. We've got another 4 or 5 minutes to wander around a little bit with this. Ask the Congressman anything that you would like to.
I don't have a specific question, but I will follow up what the sheriff said, and this is something that we can't really figure out. So we had a job fair last week, last week. We had 187 companies exhibit at the job fair, 4,000 open jobs, 300 people showed up. And it was interesting talking to the store manager for Banana Republic. She said, I've been to 10 of these, she's new to town, been to 10 of these different job fairs, and she said, every time I think I've got it figured out why people aren't working, I can't figure it out. So I don't know, that's gonna be the long-term thing that's really gonna affect our county, is just finding talent. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I'd love to have your perspective as a business person, but you know, we wanna be a part of that solution too, because the companies here only grow if they can find that talent to grow.
Good question. Congressman?
Well, you think about our labor participation rate, it really hasn't changed. And so the question is why are so many people out of the employment, out of the employment pool? And I think very clearly in other states, the federal benefits are paying people not to work. But it sounds like what you're talking about are professional jobs. I mean, that's different. And you think of the pipeline to get, and I'm just sort of knee-jerk responding to you, okay? You think about the pipeline of college or technical school and getting to that professional job, that's a timeline thing. And this hit has occurred sort of instantaneously. The COVID hit sort of came instantaneously. So I think there's some catch-up that's going to happen, and we'll hopefully get better. The shift to the technical side has not been as aggressive as I think it could have been and should have been. King for a day, I'd probably push more that way. In fact, my idea to that problem was to do much like Europe. In Europe, in 8th grade, you either track technical or you track college. I think that's a little too soon to do that for the United States. But if you are a 10th grader and you make the decision at the end of your 10th grade year that you want a technical, you could finish your last 2 years at a TCAT and then walk out of high school with a high school diploma and a welding certificate or a networking certificate and be workforce ready right out of high school. I think that would help some. But it's something we obviously got to, get some really smart people around the table and figure out. I have in Clarksville, in the places where I've been in the district, elsewhere, have shown when the governor cut those benefits that there was an increase in labor within a few weeks. Now, I don't know if that's what y'all are seeing here, but of course that's, wait staff and jobs like that. So it's not, again, solving the issue of professional. I think, some of those ideas I just mentioned would be some of the solutions to that.
Anything else we need to cover?
You're giving an open mic to a politician.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I think you should all be very proud of yourselves in Williamson County. I understand the challenges that you're talking about. Those are first world challenges, and inside this great country there are great counties, and Williamson County is at the very top. And you have great leadership. Ken and Rogers. I mean, on the law enforcement side, the chamber here has done a fantastic job. As you think of the chamber recruiting these businesses to come here, that's kind of your job, right? And then they get here and it's like, well, we got to have those employees, right? But you all should feel very good about the incredible success that this county has had. It's the envy of a lot of places across our country. And that's why you're flooded with people wanting to move here. And that's why they'll just about pay you to take a U-Haul vehicle out of this county to other places. And I know and meet every day people who've moved here from Chicago or California or New York. And it's because of the unbelievable success that you guys have had creating a community that's pretty special. There just aren't places like this on the planet. On the planet.
It's a great segue into something I wanted to do. We've got several elected officials here that have been a big part of that. Mayor Ken Moore, right here for City of Franklin. Behind him, Margaret Martin, longtime alderman, City of Franklin. Beside her husband, Bob Martin, who was city planner for 30 years, excuse me. When I was on the planning commission, I was telling Bob a while ago, I gave him a lot of crap. But you look back and you can't argue with the results. Bob, you did a fantastic job, and we appreciate your service. Dusty Rhodes, our sheriff, Bev Berger, our alderman from the 3rd Ward, is it? 1st Ward, excuse me. Yeah, 3rd Ward one. And Greg Lawrence, we've got a county commissioner with us. Of course, Sam Whitson, and there's some people I'm probably not going to recognize here, so raise your hand. Nelson Andrews over here from the city of Brentwood, and tell me who you are. Cheryl Brown, our GOP chairman here in the county. Anybody else I need to recognize? We appreciate all y'all do for our service. Okay, Chad, county commissioner, was here, but we've had great leadership, and we appreciate all y'all do for us. I want to take just a moment. We've got a sad moment that Dennis Wagner has been a huge supporter of this show. He's the face of AT&T in Williamson County. His wife passed away a couple of days ago. We want to send out a love note to him and just tell him we're thinking about him today. He's, again, AT&T's been a financial supporter of this show, and we appreciate all he's done for us, and just want us to know we're thinking about him. The staff of Congressman Green, Steve Alsbrooks, Patty Carroll here with us, made this happen. They worked on him for 2 years, or maybe 3. To make this happen, and we appreciate the effort there. And
it's not a lack of love, okay? I see many of you at other events, but it's I am confused sometimes how my schedule gets so tight. And someone asked me, "Hey, can you speak in Michigan for this event?" And I'm like, "Well, my first free Saturday is January the." And I mean, literally, that's kind of the way it is. This is a busy job, but I'm grateful for it and not complaining at all. I'm trying to help you understand why it took so long for the schedules to align to get me here.
Hey, we're just thankful to have you. This has been fascinating.
You're kind.
And we really appreciate you carving out some time for us. I do want to thank the Steve Alsbrooks.
I would like to announce that our district
Hold on. That's something I meant to ask. Tell us how to reach you guys.
The district office is in the historic courthouse in downtown Franklin. And if anybody has any issues on casework, Social Security, veterans, whatever, they can call 629-223-6050.
Great. All right. I'm sure Creed will put that on the screen when this is televised. Got Marsha Blackburn's man on the street back here. Jay, you want to tell us how to reach your office?
Our office is actually in Nashville for Middle Tennessee. It's off of West End. You can email me at j_strabino@blackburn.senate.gov. Or if there's any Afghanistan issues, help with visas and that, you can email afghanistan.evac@blackburn.senate.gov. And Our number is 629-800-6600.
Great. Really appreciate the representation we have here. Real quick, Matt, Kel, Nancy, Brian, chamber staff does a fantastic job. We appreciate you all making the show happen from all you do behind the scenes. Creed Henderson and the staff from WCTV, Tom Lawrence over at WAKM, of course AT&T, Vanderbilt University, and Lynn Maddox, both financial supporters of this show. We very much appreciate this. And most of all this morning, Columbia State Community College and Dr. Lampley. Thank you. Thanks for having us back. You're a wonderful host, and we love being here and showing off this beautiful campus. And we know you're going to have a new building starting down here soon, and we look forward to seeing it come out of the ground. And I said most of all, we really appreciate our live audience this morning, and hope you'll be back on September 24th. And our guest will be from the city of Brentwood, Mayor Ray Little, probably, unless Nelson Andrews has to step in, and City Administrator Kurt Bednar. We look forward to having them next month. Y'all have a good day. Appreciate your time.